I just pulled up to Greatton Casino in California for the Run Good Poker Series. I am so stoked. First up, we have a $200 Ambassador Bounty Tournament. We have a week full of tournaments here. I'm super stoked. I'm hoping to make some good vlogs for you guys while I'm here. But anyway, we're gonna get started here in this $200 Ambassador Bounty Tournament.
Welcome back to another Poker Face Ash vlog, and today I am in Northern California at Greatton Casino, and I am not gonna lie, I have found a new favorite Run Good Poker Series stop. This casino made me feel like a VIP. My room was immaculate, incredible, super nice, and every single meal I had at Greatton was top notch and it didn't disappoint. The Italian place was absolutely incredible. I had some pasta and a sandwich there. The hotel is just beautiful. You guys have got to check it out. And if you've never attended a Run Good Poker Series, make sure to head to rungood.com and find a stop near you. Today I have a fun vlog for you where I played in the Run Good Poker Series $250 deep stack 50K guarantee poker tournament, and we're going to start with 20-minute levels and a 30K starting stack. And for once, I actually registered within the first couple levels, so we're going to play some deep stack tournament poker. All right, let's get into some hands.
All right, well, the Ambassador Bounty Tournament was fun, but very, very short-lived. I got into a dicey spot with King Queen and then all in with pocket threes versus pocket nines, but the guy who won my bounty got an $800 entry into the main event, a $500,000 guarantee main event. So congrats to him on winning my bounty. Anyway, I'm gonna get some food. We have so many more tournaments to play this week. I'll see you guys later.
Before I get started, I want to give a quick thank you to all involved at the Greatton Poker Room: Greg Steinmans, who is the Greatton Poker Room manager, and Jordan Cutter, who's the tournament director. They were so helpful and made me feel so welcome and expedited my approval to put vlogs together so I could put this content out for you. So thank you again so much to all involved. Greatton put on a phenomenal poker series with wonderful staff and dealers. In one of the very first hands I get dealt, the blinds are 200, 400, 400, and I have a stack of about 28,000. We're a bit short-handed as this new table is still filling up, and I look down on the cutoff with pocket jacks. Only the big blind, who looks like a very loose and splashy player, makes the call, so we are going to go heads up to a flop. The flop is a dream. It's King Jack 3 with 2 hearts, so we flop middle set on a king high board. The big blind checks it over to me, and now on this type of board texture, we can bet a little bit small given that it's a king high board. There are some draws available, and there's a lot of combinations my opponent can have. And of course, with this exact hand, we're hoping my opponent has some type of king X combination, although it's very unlikely my opponent is going to have a very strong hand in this spot. So I'm going to down bet and I make it 700. Good news is my opponent makes the call, so we're going to head to a turn card, which is the Queen of Spades. And now my opponent checks it to me yet again. This is a great card because it does pair up some of my opponent's holdings. For example, if he had a hand like Queen 10 for an open ender, he now has a pair. Also, somehow if he doesn't 3-bet a hand like King Queen, he can have a very, very strong 2 pair in this spot. So obviously we're hoping my opponent has a hand like Queen 3 suited, King 3 suited, King Queen, but it's highly likely my opponent just has a mediocre holding. However, with the flush draw, straight draws on board, we do need to put money in this pot, so I bet 2,500. Sadly, our opponent quickly folds, but we do pick up a nice pot early here in this tournament. We get to play a very fun hand in this one where it's a button versus big blind situation, which, as you know, this is the most common configuration in tournament poker, button versus big blind. And in these spots, we have to fight, we have to battle for these chips. Being on the button has so many advantages, and when your opponent is in the big blind, they are forced to call with a lot of trash and crappy hands. So this gives us such an advantage to put pressure on them and get them to fold a lot of mediocre hands by the river. So in this one, it folds around to me on the button, and I look down at King 9 offsuit. A slam dunk open, we are going to raise to 1,100. The big blind, who looks like a somewhat competent player, puts in the calls. We're going to go heads up to a flop of 3, 4, 7 rainbow. The big blind checks it over to me. If I do put in a bet here, I do expect to get raised at a decent frequency, as the big blind knows this flop should be more advantageous for him. For example, he's going to have hands like 7-3, 7-4, where I'm not going to have all those hands in full. I will be folding my offsuit ones and some of my suited ones as well. He also can flop straights, but so can I. We can also have sets and overpairs, whereas my opponent can't have the strongest overpairs. So I bet here knowing I will get raised at some frequency, and I am going to put out a bet of 1,200. My opponent then, like clockwork, puts in a raise to 3,000. This raise is a little on the small side. It's not polarizing. He is out of position, so he's giving me a good price to continue. At the time, with my live reads, it felt like my opponent was just trying to take it away from me when I'm maybe c-betting a hand like an ace high, king high, queen high type holding, which my opponent isn't wrong. I am. But overall, I think my opponent's going to have a lot of weak pairs, maybe even something like 6-4, 5-3, something like that. So we're going to make a statement and let the big blind know he's he's not going to be able to push us around, and if he's going to fight for pots, I'm going to fight for them too, being that this is my button, so I click it back to 7,200. My opponent doesn't think very long before putting in the fold, so we get a nice bluff through with our king high fighting button versus big blind. In this one, our stack is 34,100, blinds are 200, 400, 400. The folds all the way around to the small blind, who seems like a pretty competent player. He puts in the raise to 1,200. This is a little bit on the smaller side, being that he is out of position. However, I look down at king, queen of diamonds, and at the time, I thought this hand was so good, we're super deep stacked, I should put in the 3-bet. However, after reviewing this hand later, king, queen of diamonds at an 80 big blind effective stack size, we are supposed to just flat this one. But as played, I made it 3,400. My opponent makes the call, so we are going to go heads up to a flop of king 5-3 with 1 diamond, so we flop ourselves a very, very nice hand. The small blind checks, and of course we're going to continue our aggression as we would with our bluffs as well. So I put in a bet of 1,800. My opponent makes the call, so we're going to head to a turn, which is a 7 of diamonds. So now we have upgraded our hand to a pair plus second nut flush draw. My opponent checks it over to me yet again. Now we are going to continue betting for value, and I'm going to go a little bit larger and make it 5,000. My opponent makes the call yet again. So at this point, I think my opponent has something like the ace high flush draw, perhaps something like ace 3 of clubs, as the board has 2 clubs and 2 diamonds. He can also just have a really good king, for example, like king jack. So we are going to head to a river card, which could quite possibly be the absolute nut low worst card in the deck. It is the ace of clubs.
No! God, please, no! No!
Bringing in the front door club flush. And now my opponent thinks for quite a while. I am hoping and praying to the poker gods that he just checks, because I will be checking back very, very quickly. But unfortunately for us, my opponent grabs almost half of his stack and bets 15,000. When an opponent calls a 3-bet out of position and check calls, leads river, it is quote-unquote never a bluff. This is a very hard spot to be bluffing. All the draws get there, and I can have a very strong hand myself, which I did in fact until the river. Also, my opponent is never going to lead for this size with a hand like a king X combination. Given this line, very, very begrudgingly and frustratingly, I have to put in the fold in this spot, and my opponent doesn't show. We don't know what he had. However, I'm very confident I made a good fold. Even if he decided to flat a hand like ace king out of position and play it passively, he could have just made top 2 pair on the river. We don't know, but I'm very confident I made a good fold. So unfortunately, we're going to take a big blow to our stack and move on to the next hand. In this hand, the low jack raises to 1,500. The hijack makes the call, and then it folds to me in the small blind, and I look down at ace king offsuit, and I have 11,200 chips, good for just over 20 big blinds. This is a slam dunk jam here, as we're happy to pick up the blinds if my opponents fold. If they make the call, we're likely way ahead or flipping. So I jam. The original opener folds, and then the opponent who flatted in the hijack thinks for a little bit, puts his chips together, and then makes the call, and here's what happened. So we get it in a great spot where we have ace king versus ace queen of hearts, and our opponent does turn the nut flush draw, but we fade it on the river, and now we've doubled up, and now our stack is 25,500, and blinds have just moved up to 300, 500, 500. A new player had sat down at the table, and he's under the gun. He had been limping a lot, and in this hand, he limps under the gun for 500. Folds around to me on the button, and I look down at ace 6 of hearts. We're definitely going to raise this one up, being that we have a suited ace in position, and I raised to 1,200. We don't need to raise too big being in position. However, I think I went a little bit too small here. Should have made it something like 1,500. But the big blind and the original limper make the call, so we're gonna go 3 ways to a flop of ace, ace, 4 with 2 spades. We flop ourselves trips. It checks over to me on the button, and while we can get called by some spade flush draws, by checking here we can keep all worse hands in and hope my opponents pair up on the turn, as our hand is very strong. We're either way ahead or way behind. We don't have the best kicker in this spot, so I do elect to check and see what develops on the turn. The turn improves our hand to a full house, as it is the 4 of clubs, and now the original limper bets 1,500. And now, because we have a nutted hand, we don't want our opponent to fold. We need to keep all worse hands in, and plus, if my opponent has an ace, we're chopping anyway, so it's best to not raise here and keep all of his worst hands in. I make the call. The big blind folds, so now we're gonna go heads up to a river card, which is the 3 of clubs. And now my opponent bets 1,300. This is a very small blocker bet. Of course, we're going to raise. It's just a matter of how much. If my opponent has a 4, I don't think he's going to fold to a raise, as he has to look me up. So I put in a raise of 5,000. My opponent must have not had much at all, as he quickly puts in the fold, but we do finally pick up a pretty nice pot. In this one, the hijack raises to 1500 as blinds are 300, 600 with the 600 big blind ante. I have about 28,000 to start the hand and look down at ace 10 of diamonds. This hand is a pure call in this position with this exact hand, so I put in the call. The big blind, who is a bit short stacked and has about 14,000 behind, he raises to 5,000. The hijack thinks for a little bit and then makes the call, and I looked up this hand in the solver. This hand is a pure call about 80% of the time, and we can fold a very small percentage, but I think we have enough equity, we are in position, so let's peel, make the call, see what happens. We go 3 ways to a flop of king 6-4 with 2 diamonds, so we flop ourselves the nut flush draw. The big blind, who has a little over 9,000 in his stack, he then jams all in. The hijack asks for a count and thinks for a little bit, and then he lands on a fold. We already knew no matter what, we were all in here and we were calling, so I put in my chips. Unfortunately, my opponent has pocket queens, so we are drawing to either an ace or diamonds, and unfortunately, we brick out. So sadly, we lose about 14,000 on this hand. Before this hand, we had lost a small pot with ace 3 of diamonds, and then I was moved to a new table with some of my friends. So at this point, my stack is 10,500 and the blinds are 300, 600, 600. The table is short-handed and I'm in the low jack and look down at pocket 4s. I have a little bit over 17 big blinds, so I think it's fine to jam this one all in as opponents tend to overfold. Sadly, I wasn't aware that this table was the crazy drinking table and I got called in 2 spots. We are all in and going to see 5 cards. One of my opponents jams on the flop and the other player folds, so now I table my hand and see what we're up against. We're up against a king high diamond flush draw, so let's hold. But there's no sweat as another 7 comes on the turn, giving us a full house, and if that wasn't enough, we hit another 4 on the river for quads, so we are going to triple up here in this tournament. In this hand, early position raises to 1600, the same player I just doubled up against. Folds to me on the button, and I look down at the beautiful 7-8 of hearts. We're going to make the call. The big blind comes as well, so we're going to go 3 ways to a flop of 10-6-3 with 2 hearts. So we flop ourselves some straight draw possibilities as well as our heart flush draw. Original raiser continues betting for 2,000. I don't think there's anything to do here other than make the call, and the big blind folds. We're going to go heads up to a turn card, which is a 7 of clubs, so now we have a pair to go along with our flush draw. And now villain bets 6,000. Again, I don't think we're doing anything here other than making the call. We have a lot of equity and our opponent can still have a lot of nutted hands. So I put the chips in and we head to a river card, which is not the card I was expecting or hoping for, but it is one that we needed. It's the 7 of diamonds. And now my opponent doesn't think very long before going all in, so if I call, I am all in and at risk for my tournament life. Obviously, we're snapping this off as we're only losing to pocket 10s or some other full house, which would be highly unlikely. My opponent could be going for 3 shrees with aces, kings, queens, etc. But when we river a sneaky trips, we're not going anywhere, so I snap call. My opponent flips over king jack offsuit for a naked king high bluff, so now we get the full double up here in this tournament. So now after that hand, our stack is up to about 64,000 at blinds 400, 800, 800, and we are back to our normal color up duties. So usually the biggest stack at the table takes the color up duties to switch out to higher denomination chips. This is a job we all know and love if you're a tournament player. We got to do the color up and we're headed to break, and when we come back, we're headed to 600, 1200, 1200. After break, I was extremely card dead and spot dead. And by the way, if you guys want some Poker Face Ash merch, I have some spot dead apparel and Poker Face Ash logo apparel. Head to my shop at pokerfaceash.com. But anyway, I dwindled down to about 25-30 bigs where I shoved with ace 10 of spades over a button open in the big blind and got it through, and then another hand when I was in the small blind, there was an open and a call and I shoved with ace king of clubs and got it through. So now my stack is back up to about 60,000 with blinds at 1,000, 2,000, 2,000. I just got word that Advanced Poker Training is letting me in on their Black Friday preview sale. It starts now and you can get in on these prices before anyone else can. Advanced Poker Training is like no other training site out there. You can play up to 500 hands per hour of both simulated tournaments and cash games. Your advisor uses artificial intelligence and tells you what to do with every hand in your range, just like you get from a solver. And you get complete reports and weekly training plans. I can't even begin to tell you everything I love about this site. And for the next 48 hours, click the link on the screen or in the video description below. Use my offer code POKERFACEASH to get by far their lowest prices of the whole year. In this hand, we raise under the gun with ace king offsuit to 4,000 as blinds are 1,000, 2,000, 2,000. The hijack, cutoff, and big blind call, not the result we wanted with this hand, so we're gonna go 4 ways to a flop of queen, 10, 6, rainbow. The big blind checks it over to me, and now with this many players to act behind me with this exact hand, I think we're gonna check and evaluate what happens. So I do check. The hijack puts out a bet of 2 big blinds or 4,000. The cutoff then min clicks it to 8,000. The big blind folds, and now it's on me. Really sucks when we have 2 overs and a gutter. However, I just don't see how we can navigate this, so I put in the fold. The other player folds as well, and the cutoff shows king, queen of hearts, so unlucky we get out flopped there, and we gotta move on to the next hand. In this one, it folds around to the hijack, and he shoves for about 15,000 chips at blind level 1,500, 2,500, 2,500. It folds around to me in the small blind, and I look down at pocket aces, the absolute dream. Of course, we're flicking in the call here, hoping that the big blind wakes up with the hand or decides to get out of the line. However, the big blind folds, and we are up against king, queen. The board runs out clean, and we are going to knock this player out and add to our chip stack. In this hand, I'm under the gun and look down at ace jack offsuit. In this spot, this is probably going to be the bottom of my offsuit ace-x opening range being under the gun, so we're going to raise this one up to 5,000 at blind level 1,500, 25, 2,500. Only the big blind calls, so we're going to go heads up to a flop of king, queen, 8 with 2 diamonds. My opponent checks in the dark, and now it's on me. All options are on the table here except checking. I think that's the worst of all options. We can bet half pot, we can bet 33%, or we can bet a quarter some of the time, and in this case, I decided to bet 3,000, a little over 1 big blind. My opponent then snap jams all in for about 20 big blinds or 50,000 chips. My opponent must have flopped some sort of combo draw or some sort of strong hand, and he wanted to deny me equity. Obviously, we can't make the call here, so we are going to let this one go. In this one, I have a stack of about 60,000 at 1,500, 2,500, 2,500. Under the gun shoves for 8,700, good for a little less than 4 big blinds. Then a player in the hijack who had about sub 20 big blinds, he puts in the call. I'm on the button and look down at ace jack offsuit. When my opponent on my right flats the all in, I really don't think he has a very strong hand, and a lot of these players, even with hands like aces or kings, and these player pools are not practicing a balanced strategy. They're not just going to flat strong hands, they're usually going to jam, so he probably has a weak ace-x combination type hand, possibly a hand like king queen suited, or a medium to smaller sized pocket pair. So with this hand, if I jam here and my opponent doesn't realize he should be making the call a ton of the time because of how many big blinds he has, I feel like I can isolate and get this heads up and hopefully win the all in and win the extra chips. So I do jam all in. My opponent thinks for a little bit, and then I think he realized that he didn't have that many more chips behind, and so he does decide on a call. My opponent has ace jack offsuit as well, so it's not looking good as the under the gun player has 8-5 of hearts. My opponent flops a pair of 8s and a flush draw, so it's not looking good for me. We don't improve on the river, and so the opponent under the gun is going to triple up and we lose a small pot. In this hand, it folds all the way around to the button and he shoves all in for 17,000 chips, good for a little less than 6 big blinds. The small blind folds, and now I'm in the big blind and look down at pocket 3s. We have a pair. We're not folding for this many big blinds, so we put in the call. We are up against ace jack offsuit, and here's what happened. We fade all the outs, all the pairs, all the overcards, all the straights, and we hold up with our pocket 3s, and now our chips are headed in the right direction. In this hand, blinds are 1,500, 3,000, 3,000, and I have a stack of about 90,000. Under the gun opens to 7,000. It folds around to me in the cutoff, and I look down at pocket queens. We are of course going to put in a 3-bet, and I raised to 20,000. The big blind then, who didn't have many big blinds behind it all, goes all in for less. The under the gun player thinks for a little bit, but since he knows he's going to see my hand because of the player all in the big blind, he decides to fold, sadly for us. So we are going to go heads up all in against the big blind. The big blind has 10-7 offsuit. We needed to fade a club, and we do, so we scoop a very healthy pot. Before this hand happened, I had lost a small single raised pot where I opened ace queen of clubs and lost on the river when it was checked down. In this one, we have a stack of about 120,000, and I look down at ace king offsuit, and I raised to 8,000 with blinds at 2,000, 4,000, 4,000. And then a new active aggressive player to my left sits down, and he 3-bets to 26,000. Then a shorter stack who I have covered jams all in. With our 30 big blind stack, we have no other option here than to jam all in. It's unlikely that my opponent on my left will fold, however, we do have some fold equity. He most likely has a pair like 10s, jacks, or queens, and so we're happy to flip for for a very, very big pot here. There's about 38 players left, 18 make the money, so we can't wait around and fold. We have to find spots because we're trying to win this tournament. So I do rip all in for about 30 big blinds. My opponent snap calls, he has pocket queens, and I would show you guys what happened, but I accidentally dropped my camera, got it set up just in time to see the turn in the river, and sadly, we cannot improve. The other player had ace jack offsuit, so it was looking pretty slim for us, and now, unfortunately, our opponent had us covered and we are out of the tournament.
Well, if that's not tournament poker, I don't know what is. Have a decent stack and then get involved in hands where, you know, we're just really not going anywhere. Either way, we are going busto there with the queens versus ace king, because I'm gonna raise, he's gonna 3-bet, and I'm gonna jam, and we're gonna play a massive flip. So anyway, we finished like 36th place out of 100 and something people. And always a blast here at the Run Good series. A ton of hands to go over in this vlog. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, would you do me a huge favor and go all in and like, comment, and subscribe? It would mean the world to me. We are just getting started here in Greatton. I'll see you guys for the main event.